Saturn was the worst planet in Fortuna Major. Just as Jupiter was Fortuna Major, the best planet, so Saturn was in Fortuna Major, the worst planet, in that his influence was supposed to bring about death and disaster and pestilence and plague and treachery and all sorts of unfortunate things. His influence wasn't believed to be bad in itself, actually. It was only bad if you received it badly. If it made you into a cynic and a malcontent and a mope, then you were receiving Saturn's influence in the wrong way. But if you received it in the right way, he would make you into a true contemplative. He would give you the gift of insight. He would allow you to have a kind of penetrating and godly wisdom to see into the heart of things.
The planet of deep thinkers.
Yeah, the planet of deep thinkers. That's how Dante uses the qualities of Saturn in the Divine Comedy, one of the greatest poems of the Middle Ages, which Lewis thought was the highest point that poetry had ever reached. Saturn, therefore, his influence is only bad if you receive it in the wrong way. If you receive it in the right way, and it's difficult to receive it in the right way because it's so hard, but if you do receive it in the right way, then you become a true contemplative. You're not deflected by the surface, the superficial reality of things, but you can see into the heart of reality. So, in the last battle, all sorts of disasters occur right from the start. It's a terribly dark and frightening book, The Last Battle. I remember when I was a young boy reading it and feeling absolutely terrified at all these desperate things that went on with, murders and trees being cut down and people pretending to be Aslan and all sorts of invasions from other lands and
expecting a victory somehow out of this mess, and yet...
Well, yeah, quite. You might expect from what Lewis did in the previous Narnia books that these difficulties would be overcome, but in fact they're not. Everybody dies. Literally everybody in the story dies. Saturn was connected to Father Time, and Father Time with his scythe and his hourglass. I mean, that's a fairly popular picture, Father Time, but that picture of Father Time is based on earlier pictures of Saturn, Lewis says in the discarded image. So Father Time and Saturn are the same character, effectively. So when, in the last battle, Father Time brings Narnia to an end, you remember how Father Time wakes and he then reaches out his hand and he crushes the sun like an orange, and everything immediately becomes freezing cold and black. And it's interesting, if you look at an early draft of the Narnia books, when Father Time is first introduced, he's actually called Saturn. It's there in the typescript.
But he's sleeping in the...
But he's sleeping in the silver chair. That's when he's first introduced. But he's described as Saturn, and Lewis had obviously thought that was too obvious. When he finally came to publish the books, he changed Saturn to Father Time, because he banked on us not knowing that Father Time and Saturn are the same character.
And he was right.
And he was right. Yeah, most of us are completely unaware of that. But, in a sense, Saturn actually steps onto the page of The Last Battle and is an actor in the drama. However, in addition to all these terrible things, the coldness and the bleakness and the treachery of that goes on throughout the story, King Tyrion and Jewel the unicorn and the other faithful Narnians, they remain loyal to Aslan despite all these disasters. At one or two moments they begin to doubt, but then Tyrion thinks to himself that Aslan and Tash, they can't be the same character. It's all nonsense. It must be a cheat. And he doesn't believe what the ape is saying anymore. And his thoughts are clear, and he remains loyal to Aslan. And he thinks, he says that we are faithful to the true Aslan, and it may be, Jewel says, that we will sup at his table tonight when we die. They're not going to allow death to interrupt their loyalty and their relationship with Aslan. So it's a very profound message, really, that Lewis is trying to get across. And it's interesting to me that of all scriptural verses, the one that most often appears in Lewis's writing is the cry from the cross, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Psalm 22.
A broken and a contrite heart awaits most surely those who follow that road most faithfully. For Christ himself that road leads to, why hast thou forsaken me?
And it's interesting that in the last battle, he kind of reworks that. When Tyrion is bound to the tree, you remember he's tied to the tree, and the animals come and feed him and wipe away the blood from his mouth. And he calls out in his darkness and the loneliness, he calls out to Aslan, come and help Narnia, come and set us free. And nothing happens. The darkness and the loneliness and the coldness go on just as before.
As far as he knows.
As far as he knows.
Mm.
And yet, he is somewhat stronger for calling upon Aslan. And although he doesn't know it at that point, Jill and Eustace are about to come to his aid and strengthen him for the final agonies that he will have to go through. That episode, I think, is a profound reimagining of the crucifixion, if you like, but it's put into fairy tale form, and it's part and parcel of this idea that Saturn, for all his disastrous influence, actually brought about the best thing in one sense. That is to say, he taught you not to rely on superficially attractive things. It's a terribly hard message to take, but it does usher everybody into to Aslan's country after death, and they discover that noble death is a treasure that no one is too poor to buy.
And it shows a different character of one of the different characters of God, and the God who can bring disaster, as well as the harder side of God, which we don't like very much.
That's right, the mysterious side. It's a hard message to convey, but drawing upon all his familiarity with Saturnine qualities, which he writes about so much in the rest of his work, C.S. Lewis was able to turn these qualities into this powerful story. It's not just a retelling of the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse. I mean, that, of course, is also there in Lewis's mind. He's drawing upon biblical sources as well, but the controlling imagery, the imaginative structure of the book, is derived from Saturn. That's an important point to make, actually, because some people think that this planetary scheme to the Narnia books means that the books can't therefore be biblical. But they are biblical. Lewis's theology is very biblical, but it is conveyed by means of this planetary imagery.
Interesting. So you have the Genesis imagery in...
That's right, in Magician's Nephew you have the Genesis story reimagined by means of Venus. In The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe you have the Gospel story reimagined by means of Jupiter imagery, kingly imagery. In The Last Battle you have the Book of Revelation reimagined by means of Saturnine imagery. But it was the planetary imagery which I think was Lewis's controlling scheme. And that helps explain, by the way, that the other four books, where there's no very obvious biblical material being retold, those other four books, they still cohere with the rest of the series, because there again Lewis is using planetary imagery: Mars, Sun, Moon and Mercury. But in those four cases the planetary imagery didn't relate very clearly and obviously to any particular biblical passage. But Lewis's starting point, the planetary imagery, was the same across all seven. And in three cases it disposed itself in a very scriptural fashion, and in four cases it didn't, so obviously. And that's one of the reasons I think this planetary explanation to the Narnia books must be correct, because it explains all seven books, I think, equally well. Whereas if you come at the books first and foremost from the idea that Lewis was retelling the Bible, and that was his only governing idea, well, that does work well for three of the stories, but it doesn't work so well for the other four.
And it appears forced.
And it appears a bit forced when you try to hammer out biblical parallels in the other four books.